There you are.
Hi. Okay, so we're going to get started with, this is chapters 14 through 16. So remember, I kind of took the information, since a lot of it I felt was really kind of not over our heads, but a lot of it went beyond the purposes of this class. So I just took the more high-level points, and that's what I'm going to go over. So what I was saying the last time we met, and I'll kind of reiterate it this time, is I'm not going to expect you to know material that we don't cover in these slides. So what I mean, like today we're going to go over Monte Carlo simulation. We're not going to go over how to do it because it's really long, drawn out, it's really, really complicated. But what I expect you to know for purposes of the exam is what it is, and what I have outlined on the slide, and then what it talks about in the book. I'm not going to expect you to know how to do it, but I expect you to know about it. Does that make sense? Okay. So, oh, no, it's got turned out. Maybe. No. Okay. So capital budgeting, project risk analysis, current asset management, and then we'll kind of sum it up with some key points at the end. So capital budgeting, I got a video after this. And you guys know I love my little videos. So we'll go ahead and play this, and just kind of gives us that intro into what is working capital and kind of sets up the next couple slides. I think I got a couple of these this time. Sorry. And sorry, this is all linked up in your slides too, so if you want the link. So all those should look familiar, right? Stuff we talked about back in chapter 17, I think. So just a good little intro to start talking about working capital. The first part of what we're going to talk about today, give us a little setup for it. So we have different ways that budget projects are kind of categorized. Now, if you have things that are capital projects, when I was in the field working, we considered anything capital. If you had one purchase that was going to be over $1,000, it had to go through a capital budgeting process because we considered that a capital budget project. So, working in supply chain management and in purchasing, we worked really hard to negotiate those big purchases down under $1,000 to keep them from having to go through that process because it's very lengthy. I think ours required about 10 signatures to sign off on it before we could purchase, a TV. You have to get special grade TVs for hospitals. And so we worked really hard to negotiate to try and keep those costs down. So you can have mandatory replacements. You can have when you expand your existing services, so those have two different categories that go with it. And then you can expand into new services. So existing services would be like expanding your operating room, right? If you're opening up maybe a new surgical tower. And then new services would be just opening up that new service line that your health organization hasn't historically offered before. So when we look in terms of investor-owned, most of the semester we focused on non-for-profit, but I'm trying to keep bringing just a little bit of for-profit back in there. So looking at investor-owned businesses, we're looking at making money, right? That's our bottom dollar. Is we have money, we have to pay out to shareholders. Non-for-profit businesses, though, why would it be important to kind of understand the difference between these, knowing that for-profit, we really want to, our bottom dollar or our bottom line is we want to make money, and in non-for-profit, we're identifying kind of expected effect on our financial condition. So here we're looking at contributor or shareholder wealth. Here we're looking at overall financial condition.
I think it's not for-profit, like a constant.
Well, think who our stakeholders are here, right? Different than for-profit. So we are beholden to the community at large, to our pay, we have just a couple different sets of stakeholders as compared to investor-owned businesses that we need to just be a little more cognitively aware of when we're working in that non-for-profit side. So this one's just going to go over, we just went over kind of the difference or what we want to look for between for-profit and non-for-profit. So we're going to look at kind of, to build on the first video, when we start to notice that company's in trouble. All right, everybody remember when we covered debt to equity, right? So, hold on, let me pause this real quick. So they mentioned liquidity, they would face liquidity problems. What's liquidity again?
How much cash?
Yeah, so like how quickly can we convert our assets into cash? So we list the most liquid at the top, starting with cash, and kind of work our way down. So some insider trading. I don't know if maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm about to date myself really bad. But does anybody remember a couple years ago Martha Stewart getting arrested for insider trading? Nobody remembers. Actually, I mean it was a big deal, but you don't know who Martha Stewart? Okay, I'm just gonna go on. No, just she is like. She was like the one that had the show, like Martha Stewart Living, and she would like show you how to arrange. No, well sometimes she could, but she would like to show you how to arrange flowers, and it was like, well, she had some insider trading, went to jail, but because of this, she took some insider information, and essentially, just to break it down, it's not fair to your shareholders, right? If you have proprietary knowledge that hey, my company is kind of tanking, I need to unload. And then that's going to decrease the price of stock, and so you're going to see the stock fall. Mm-hmm. Okay.
When I was cooking one time, someone said, "Oh, look at you, Martha Stewart." So that's why I thought it was a cooking show.
I mean, she would cook. I can't believe you don't know Martha Stewart. It's so disappointing. So you talk about cash flows is one of the ways you can kind of see if a company is in trouble or if it's kind of starting to go downhill. So when we tie that back into capital budgeting and we look at it from an analysis standpoint, how we go about capital budgeting analysis is first we look at the cash flows, the ins and outs of the organization, right? So how money is moving. And we know from previous chapters this can be a really difficult step, but there's a reason it's the first thing we look at because it's probably the most critical step in just looking how money's moving through the organization. See if there's some maybe like things going on, or it's going to give us an indicator onto what's really going on within the organization. So we look at the outlays, the operating flow, and kind of that terminal point in terms of cash flow. Last time or time before last, we talked about riskiness, so we're just looking at the overall risk of the project in general. Then we're going to estimate the cost of capital, so that opportunity cost rate, and then measure its overall financial impact. So 4 steps into kind of this overview of financial analysis in terms of capital budgeting. But when we look at the estimation, we want to focus on cash flow as opposed to accounting income. So why do you think that would be? Or why do you think we would want to focus mainly on cash flow, the ins and outs and how cash is moving through the organization versus accounting income?
Cash flows, I think it's tells us how much money is going in and coming in, and it's going out and coming in, while income only tells us how much.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So cash flow is going to give us that true ins and outs of how much money we really have in and how much we have out. And depending on how you have your accounting set up, you could do zero-based accounting, remember we talked about, or you could do the other kind of accounting where you're building off the previous month and you may have some deliverables that you need to collect on, or receivables that you need to collect. So you have a truer picture with cash flow than with accounting income. So we focus on incremental cash flow, like I just said, where we look at the cash flow with project 1, or with the project, sorry. So we look at the cash flow with the project minus the cash flow without the project, and that's going to give us the incremental cash flow overall. Cash flow timing. This is kind of why it starts to get a little bit trickier and a little bit difficult to do, but we analyze exactly when these cash flows are going to, or when we expect them to occur. And we know they occur daily, but if you have a very large organization, just think how time and resource and cost intensive that's going to be to really estimate the ins and outs of the cash flow every day out of your organization. I mean, think just with the Med Center alone, how difficult that would be with all the different departments it has, all the different outpatient ancillary services, even down to the granular level, things like their cafeteria, the pharmacy, the gift shop, the little bagel place they have. I mean, it can get very, very intensive trying to estimate all that. So we really approximate it by the annual flows in and out of the organization, or what we're going to look at for that project overall. So with the project life, we excuse me. Often we don't know, but we set it for about 5 to 10 years. But we ended or kind of truncated if it's going to go longer than 10 years. So we're estimating the life of the project should not extend past 10 years overall. So when we look at these kind of concepts in cash flow, we're not going to include the sunk costs overall into our estimate of the project cost. So first, let me ask, what are sunk costs?
Great question.
That is an excellent question. That's why I asked it.
Yes.
So what would you think sunk, just based off the terminology, what would you think sunk costs would be?
Something like done with or something.
You're on the right track, huh?
I don't remember. Did I remember going in there? I don't remember.
Just kind of pop quizzing you through this little
Yeah, it's some money they're losing, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
No, I mean, that's exactly right. So let's say it's the money that you're putting into the project that you're not going to get back regardless if you go with the project or not. So this is like consult fees. So if you pay a consultant to go out and do some legwork for you to see whether this project's going to be profitable or not, I mean, you've paid that
It's like
consultant.
an auction.
Kind
Yeah,
of.
if you want or not, you just pay something. Getting the auction.
Yeah, kind of like that. So you're paying the consultant, and their determination is not going to affect the cost. You still have to pay them regardless of whether you're going to do the project or not. So these are costs you're not going to get back. They're, think more like consultation fees. So what about opportunity costs? We are going to include opportunity costs in our overall estimation, where we're not going to include sunk costs, but what are opportunity costs?
Just the context, the marginal cost,
The what?
marginal cost,
The managerial cost?
marginal,
Marginal cost, sorry.
like is that the extra costs?
Kind of.
That's what you would get back to the project or something.
Well, so the opportunity, I don't remember what chapter we discussed this in, but it's the opportunity you could have on an alternate project of same intensity level. So opportunity costs, we're just kind of looking at both scenarios and saying, if we put project A and B together, B is going to be the opportunity cost of A. So we want to include those in our estimation for capital and for looking at capital and then for the other resources that are going to go into that. But we want to consider the impact on other business lines. So just by that statement alone, what do I mean by that overall statement, and why would we want to consider that?
Is there to change something that you already have going on financially?
Yeah, exactly. So, if we think, if we're going to go in to offer this new service line, XYZ service line, is that going to have some kind of domino effect down onto our surgeries? Is that going to increase our surgery volumes? Is it going to increase our radiation oncology volumes? Is it going to increase our clinic volume? Or is it going to decrease? So what's the effect it's going to have on maybe, if we do this new project or expand this new service, what effects it's going to have down the line, or maybe some other service lines that we're already offering? And then, of course, we have to consider inflation effects and the strategic value implications. So think back to when we talked about break-even. It seems like it's been such a long time ago. But we can have a couple different ways that we look at break-even when we talk about project analysis. So time break-even, which we covered, I think that was in chapter 9 maybe. And then we can look at input variable break-even, just looking at if we have, like I have on the example here, if we have 4,142 scans versus 5,000, or if we have a net revenue of $73 per scan versus 80, of what we expect and kind of how that's going to flesh out. So when we talk about break-even analysis, particularly under time break-even, payback period, let's first define this. What is payback period?
Oh.
Don't make it complicated.
What do you
Time to payback.
Yeah. When are you going to get the payback on the money you put in, or what's your overall payback period? So the benefits of this, if you have the shorter payback period, you're going to be able to recoup those funds quickly, right? And pump them back into your business to help your overall, business operations. And they're generally less risky than your longer payback periods. So a couple of disadvantages, though. We don't really look that much at cash flows that occur after the payback period. Since this is a shorter period, we're kind of looking towards just when we get paid back and not really looking after that. And then doesn't really look at opportunity costs associated with capital. So we determine that using cumulative cash flows, which we're going to talk about on this slide. So I have an example up here, and I'm going to see kind of how, not outside the box, but how critically you can kind of think through this. Now, this is an example that came out of our text or our chapter for today, but we'll kind of work on this as a class. Our goal is to fill in these question marks. So the first question is, what is the cumulative cash flow overall? So how do you think, before I go and give you the answer, how do you think you would go through calculating this? So if we know we put this much, $2.5 million into a project, that's our cost in, right? We know our cumulative cash flow in year 0 when we start the project, we have $2.5 million in, cumulative cash flow negative 2.5 million, because that's the money we've invested in. Year one, we expect to bring in a cash flow of $510,000. So what would we anticipate our cumulative cash flow to be?
We had
What was it?
2.5 million to 510,000.
Yeah, so what is that? Somebody break out a calculator.
Three 3 million 10,000. 3 million.
Are you adding them?
Wait, hold
3
on.
million 10,000.
So you would add a negative 2.5 million to the 510,000, right? So we should get a negative,
Okay.
right?
Okay, that's true. That's the money.
Negative.
Break out a calculator.
Negative 3.
Just put in your number and hit minus.
Let's subtract.
No, wait.
10,000.
I was up there. I was trying to know that.
So, yeah, so this is a negative 2.5 million. So we're gonna take the negative 2.5 million and add to it a positive 510. So what's that? Ashley is
It is
slowly working her calculator.
negative 1,990,000. Sorry.
1990.
000. Nope. Comma, yeah.
1.9, negative 1.9 million, right? Okay, so we know that's our cumulative cash flow for year one. Where would we be year two? If we know our annual cash flow, 535,000.
You subtract that.
Adding the positive 535,000
Okay.
to the negative 1.9 million.
What is it?
535,500.
Negative 1,454,500.
Okay, do you guys see how we're getting these numbers consecutively on down? So we'll go through, I won't make you go through and solve the rest of them. Well, actually I will, because I got these other questions. So actually keep going. Year three,
But then you add the next one,
well,
or you
yeah, we're always adding because this is a
Okay.
cumulative.
so 5, 6, 2,
275.
You get negative 892,225.
892,000.
225
Okay, and then where are we at for year four?
plus 590,398. You get negative 301,827.
Okay, and then where are we at for year five?
1 million positive 1,068,081.
$1,068,000. And what?
$81.
So in year five, we end up with a positive 1.6, almost 1.7 million. So where would you think our payback period would occur, where we start to recoup our costs? Year five, right? So if we want to be more specific and say what year is the project going to be recovered, where are we going to get our overall total cost? If we want to be more specific than year five, how do you think we would go about solving that? Figure out you're on the right track. What happened between year 4 and 5. So we want to know, so we know at year 5 we're going to be over what our cost is, right? So we want to know how far into year 5 we're going to have to get before we truly break even, right, economically. So we're going to take 301,827, so we know that's what we ended year 4 with. We're going to divide that by our cash flow, 1,361,908 into year 5, because we know we have to at least recoup this much into year 5 cash flows. So where does that put us, Ashley? 301, 827 divided by 1369, 908. Should be like 0.22.
0.216.
0.2, yeah, we'll just call it 0.22. So we know our project is going to be recovered at 4.22 years overall. Everybody see how we got to that point? Kind of, yeah. So this just come out of page 532 in your text. This just kind of outlines where these numbers came from. So you can see at year 0 where we got the 2.5 million. This was a system cost, and then any related expenses. What we kind of expected our cash or estimated our cash revenues and costs out to be, and what we ended each year with in terms of net cash flow. So we'll just check. If we did the math correctly, this is what we should end up with, all the way down to 1,000. I wrote this backwards. 1068 081. No. Payback period realized in year 5, and then more specific in 4.22 years. Good there? So let's say we purchase a CT machine for $50,000, and that's pretty cheap. If you know anything about equipment purchases, those are more in the millions of dollars. And now we have an associated related expenses of an additional $50,000. So we're going to say net cash flows for the next 3 years are going to be $70,000, $50,000, $20,000. How are we going to set up our table? What's the first thing we're going to put in year 0, and then we'll go on down and kind of do this as a class. So what's going to go in annual cash flow, cumulative cash flow for year 0, and then let's work on down. So here, let's write these numbers down. So we have 50,000 in the MRI. We have 50,000 in expenses. We know our cash flows are going to be 70, 50, and 20. Okay, so where are we at for year 0?
So for 0, it puts like 100,000.
100,000. Okay, how did you get that? Just for our online folks as well.
We had like the cost of the MRI with the other expenses.
Yeah, MRI plus the expenses, so we're sitting at 100,000. So what would that make our cumulative cash flow?
Same.
Same. Okay, negative 100,000. So where are we at year 1?
70,000.
70,000 for our annual. In year 2, we're at 50,000 and 20,000 in year 3, based off what we estimated, right? So now, what's our cumulative cash flow look for year 1, 2, and 3?
3,000.
Yeah.
Negative 30, all right. Then we're
plus 20,000.
positive 20,
What?
And positive
positive 40,000, ending us in year 3. So what year are we going to recover the project?
Year 2.
Between 1 and 2.
Okay, payback period will be.
Yeah, what's our payback period first
Year
of all? Year 2 for the payback period.
And recover will be.
How do we get the 40,000? Sorry.
How do we get the
20
40,
plus
20, 20?
So we divide.
So we're working on recovery period right now, right?
Yeah. So we divide the 20,000. Plus 20. Is that?
So we know that we're going to
Okay, it's going
recover.
to be between that. So it's going to be negative 30,000 divided by the last one, 20, right?
No, total. 100.
50, right?
Oh, okay, 50. Yeah.
Think back to our example we looked at here.
Yeah.
See? Because we knew we had to just figure out how far into this 1.3 million we had to get to recover that. So same principle applies here, where we're going to figure out how much into this 50,000 we have to get to recover that cost. So where are we at with here?
-0.6.
Negative? No, it's not negative here.
0.6.
So we are going to recover at 1.6 years, right?
Yep.
Payback period at 2, which we got specifically 1.6 years, and this last cumulative, I don't know why I don't have it up there, should be 40. Still on track, making sense a little bit more that we worked through a couple of these little problems. Okay, so we know payback period, we initially used this as more evaluation tools, mainly to see how long we were gonna have to use this asset before it starts becoming profitable, right? So it's not any different concept across business lines. You know, people do this in other industries besides healthcare. We want to see how long we have to use this asset before it really starts to become profitable to us. But we take into account the original cost of the project, like I said, and we anticipate those annual cumulative cash flows at a point in time. But we measure payback period, think back to the video, we measure payback period, or we use it as a measurement of what now, really? So there were some terms we used, looking at cash flows. Well, we use it as a measure of liquidity now, right? So we want to see how quickly we can turn that project liquid, if we need to, based on what's our anticipated kind of cash flows and when are we going to recover our expenses or our ROI, or when are we going to get our ROI, I should say. So just another look on the return. Actually, that's a good intro. Find it. I'm looking on the return on investment. I'm gonna back up just 1 second. How would this look for a non-for-profit? Are we talking about non-for-profit or for-profit here? How do you know? Because we have dividends, right? We don't pay out dividends in non-for-profit. What formula did they just use? Right? And they just did A divided by L plus E. And just kind of as a side note, I don't know if you guys have noticed a lot of these videos I get from a site called Investopedia. It's a really great resource if you want to know more about financial accounting. I mean, they've got short little videos like this, and I mean, it's a great
Are
resource.
they on YouTube?
No, just go to Investopedia.com and pull it up. That's where I get a lot of these videos, and they're really good to kind of help explain some of these more complicated topics. So profitability, so we're looking at return on investment. Got 15 till. You guys just want to keep going. We don't have that much left. If you need to take a break, just get up and walk. I don't care if you have to walk out. I mean, I do. I want you to come back. But if you need to get up and walk out, that's fine. Profitability, looking just more at the return on investment. So obviously, we're going to focus on what's that return that we're going to invest into that project, and how much money is it overall going to get us back, or when are we going to see that return come in across our balance sheets. So we can either look in dollar terms, or we can look in, excuse me, rate of return, or more along the lines of percentage terms. And companies do it both ways, one way or another. There's no really rhyme or reason. Some just look at dollar terms, some look at percentage, some look at both, depending on what the percent or what the project is. So there's 3 aspects that we're going to look at in terms of returns. Hopefully you guys still remember and familiar with net present value. So we're going to look at net present value. A new concept, I think, for us is internal rate of return. We haven't discussed this yet, have we? Okay, internal rate of return. I'm just looking at that project's rate of return, obviously, internal rate of return, and then modified rate of return. So it's also going to look at a percentage rate of return. So NPV, or net present value, we're looking in dollar terms instead of percentage returns. So if you'll remember back to the lecture where we talked about NPV, just recall it's just the sum of our present cash flows added together, right? So we're looking at what's our net present value in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however long we're going out, what's all those together to get our net present value. And when we use the discount rate, that's the project cost of capital. So a couple key important terms to remember, probably to kind of imprint in your old brain there. If the NPV of a project is positive, then obviously we expect the project to be profitable, right? Positive, positive. If it's the higher the NPV, obviously the more profitable it's going to be for us and for our organization. And on the reverse of that, if it's negative, we expect it to be unprofitable. So you can see here, we did the net present value for 4 periods, because we don't know if they're years, quarters, whatever they may be. We did that for 4 periods out. The project's NPV is about $117,000 overall, right? Again, just to kind of refresh you how we solve that through an Excel sheet. You can do the timeline here. You can do it through Excel, a little bit easier if you're an Excel nerd like me. So you can set it up through Excel to kind of solve for that. But if we have an NPV of 0, what do you think that would indicate to us? If we know that an NPV that's positive means profitable, and the higher it is, the more profitable. If it's negative, it's unprofitable. The larger the negative number, probably the more unprofitable it's going to be. So if we have an NPV that's just sitting right at 0, what can we start to assume? We have a break even. Do we have an economic or an accounting? Economic break even, right?
Yeah.
So we can assume that if we see an NPV of 0, that we've completely just broken even on the project. And then if we start moving up or down, depends on if it's profitable or not. So moving from net present value into internal rate of return, here we're switching from looking at dollars in net present value to looking at percentage or our rate of return with internal rate of return, and how it affects our return on investment, or our ROI. So the discount rate that works to force our present value of our inflows is equal to that of the cost of the project. So kind of taking that and twisting it around and making it a little simpler to understand, we're just saying that the discount rate, or what is the discount rate that forces our project's net present value to be 0 and reach that break-even point? And when we look at the IRR, we know the IRR is going to be, or it's going to represent our project's expected rate of return, just that estimated rate of return that we should get back on the project. So when we solve IRR, we set it up similar to how we did for net present value, where we have our project cost to capital. We list out our cash flow starting at year 0. We list up from year 1 or period 1 all the way down through however many periods we have. Excel, just like net present value, has this great formula where you just start typing in IRR and it'll tell you what cells to pick. So it's going to say, hey, when you start typing in IRR, the first thing it's going to tell you is, tell me what the cost of capital is. What's that percentage? Then tell me what variables I'm going to look at. Well, I'm going to look at 0 all the way down through 4. And then that's going to come back at 29.7% for our IRR. Highly recommend using Excel. Just makes things a lot easier. So if we have a IRR that's greater than the cost of capital, so we know our project cost of capital is 10%, we're looking in terms of percentage, IRR is 29.7, then we have an excess return that works in our benefit in terms of equity of our business. So in that example we just looked at where we have 29% IRR, cost of capital at 10%, we can automatically start to assume that this project that we're looking at based on the cash flows and the cost of capital is going to do nothing but help to enhance our financial conditions overall, right? Because the IRR, the internal rate of return that we expect back, is greater than what we're investing into it overall. This is a slide I was telling you that's not in the slide deck yet. But just to, the last time I taught this class, I didn't have the slide included. There were a lot of questions just how net present value and cost of capital and IRR all work to relate together. So I came up with this little chart. Like I said, I didn't have it included in the slide deck for the last class that I taught, but I wanted to include it this time to just kind of give you like, if this happens, then this happens, and then this is the kind of decision you should make. So if we have an NPV that's less than 0, then we're going to have an IRR that's less than the cost of capital. Probably need to reject that investment, right? Because it's going to be less, the return we're going to get back is less than what we're going to put into it. If we have an NPV that's equal to 0, our IRR is going to equal our capital. We're going to get minimal returns. Probably don't want to invest the time and resources into it if we're going to get minimal returns, right? And then NPV greater than 0, we can automatically start to assume IRRs greater than cost of capital. Before we kind of full-fledged jump into it, be a little cautious. Remember, we're all risk averse. We don't, by nature, and we don't want to, take unnecessary risk. Going to indicate to us, probably need to do just a little bit more analysis, look into it, make sure our numbers are right, all the I's dotted, T's crossed, and do other investments. So we're looking at that opportunity cost. Do other investments provide equal or better returns? And can they do it with less time intensive or less intensive resources, I guess? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that kind of help tie the relationship together between all of them? Maybe?
Yeah. Is the end of the project, or at some point in the middle we say, hey, let's stop and see what we're doing?
So this is before we start to invest in the project. Yeah, so we're going to look at all these kind of variables. This is why, you want, so we want to kind of have a good estimate of what this project is going to bring back to us before we decide to put our money into it, to see if it's even going to be worthwhile. It's a very highly educated guess. Nothing's certain, and like the video said, there's a lot of things out in the economy that can kind of influence what our returns are going to be back, especially with our cash flows when we look at inflation and, reimbursement structures, things like that.
Trying to know
Technology.
whether it's a sound investment or not.
Yeah, we're trying to see if it's a solid investment. So even things like, if we go back to our MRI example, even things like technology, and think about how fast technology changes, especially in healthcare. We can invest all this money into this MRI machine that's top of the line this year, but if we're not cognizant of the trend going on out in the environment, and we're not up to date and aware, kind of staying ahead of things, and we don't realize that they're anticipating this even new and better and greater MRI machine to come out next year.
It's the renting thing.
Yeah, we may, be losing a lot of money because we're not aware of our surroundings. So moving out, I'm talking about cost of capital, moving into project risk analysis. So again, just talking about risk and budgeting overall. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty about the project's profitability, just like we know there's uncertainty out in the marketplace. If we don't know our cash flows for certain, we cannot accurately forecast what our profitabilities are, right? So we automatically have risk built into this project. And it's just unavoidable. We can't for 100% certainty say what those cash flows are going to be for all those reasons that we just talked about. So with all investments, risk and how risk averse you are as an organization is really going to be the primary determinant of a project's rate of return or what we need to get back to make this worthwhile. So there's 3 different types of project risk that we can measure, and we're going to talk about each one of these individually. We have standalone risk, which we talked about, I don't remember, a couple chapters ago, but we talked about standalone risk, corporate risk, and market risk. And the type of risk that we look at really depends on the situation, right? So standalone risk, think about, I think when we talk about this, we compared this to investment portfolios, right? So standalone risk is when you have that one singular investment. It's held in isolation. It's kind of out there by itself. It's not part of the portfolio. It's just one single investment. So it ignores, look, I grabbed the eraser instead of my little clicker. So we're holding it in isolation and we're ignoring anything else in the portfolio that may affect it. We measure the amount of uncertainty and forecasted profitability. So the more uncertainty we have, the more risk we have. Pretty simple. And we use standard deviation as this measure of standalone risk. So generally, only the risk is somewhat measurable. We really have to use a lot of intuition here and be as close to spot on with our numbers as we can. Like I said, use standard deviation as that measure of standalone risk. And a couple of chapters ago, we talked about how we use the standard deviation and the variance to kind of do those calculations, right? So moving from standalone risk into corporate risk. Excuse me. Corporate risk is the overall riskiness to the business. So now we're looking at that portfolio. How risky is it going to be on our business? So what is that standard deviation of our return on equity? So this is going to depend, the corporate risk overall is going to depend on our standalone risk. So we're looking at the standard deviation and how that correlates to overall returns for the business. So what's that correlation between the two? Where standalone risk, we're just looking at holding it in isolation and not how it affects anything else. Corporate risk, we're looking at the overall riskiness. Market risk, we're looking at overall riskiness of a well-diversified stock portfolio. So just a little bit different here. It's going to depend on, again, the standalone risk, the standard deviation, and the correlation to the market portfolio. Remember, in corporate risk, corporate think business, we're looking at the correlation to the overall returns for the business. Market risk, think market portfolio. We're looking at the correlation between the standalone risk and then how that correlates in terms of the returns for the market portfolio overall. Now again, I know this is a lot of information across a lot of chapters. That's why I said I'm not going to expect you to know how to calculate any of this because I don't explicitly go over it in class. But when you're studying for the exam and kind of reading up, make sure you read the details about market risk and understand. These are just kind of the high level points, but I'm not going to expect you to know how to calculate or anything, but for purposes of the exam. So standalone risk, generally only look at this for those smaller businesses. They're not really well diversified. Corporate, we're looking more to larger corporations on the non-for-profit side, and market risk, since we're dealing in the marketplace where we trade stocks and stuff, we're looking at larger investor-owned businesses. So that's the main difference between corporate at market risk. Corporate, we're looking at non-for-profit. Market, we're looking at more investor-owned businesses here. Because we're looking at the marketplace, right? So there's a couple techniques, and this may take you back to if you're in the MPH program, because I know I have some students online that are not as well. But this may take you back to EPI or bio, maybe, right? So this kind of look a little familiar. So there, see, it would come up again. You're going to do this stuff again, guys. So there's 3 different ways we can measure this standalone risk. We can look at sensitivity, we can look at scenario, then we can look at Monte Carlo simulation. Now, again, I'm not going to expect you to know how to calculate these unless I explicitly go over it on the slide, but I do expect you to know the details. So sensitivity analysis. Aside from this, tell me what you know about sensitivity analysis and kind of the details of it, or the overview, or the kind of high-level key points, or any singular word you remember about sensitivity analysis.
It was the actual causes versus
Well, so how I think about it is how sensitive is something to one change that you made in it. Like, how sensitive are you to one maybe minute change? So we're looking at changes in an input variable such as utilization effect on profitability. So what I mean by that is every variable that we have in this analysis is going to be held at the base case, except one. We're going to change one variable to see how sensitive this is to that variable change and see how much of an effect that one maybe little variable has on the overall analysis. So then we then the variable that we're going to be looking at is changed from its base case, from what we kind of estimate off the base case, to a set of percentages. So we may go up, what happens at a 10% increase? What happens at a 20% increase? What happens at a 30% increase? So we're seeing how sensitive that variable is to the overall analysis, like I said. So we have a couple advantages. We can identify, because we can see which ones are the most sensitive, we can see which ones are the most critical, right? So if we have a sensitivity analysis, we're looking at one variable and we do these percentage increases and it doesn't change much, it's not very sensitive, right?
Yeah.
But by a kind of process of elimination, we can see which variable is that most critical variable to change. So like it says, variables that if the forecasts are absolutely wrong, they're going to have the most influence on profitability. So we want to be kind of spot on with these different types of analysis. So you give us some break even. It's also going to give us some basic break even information with the sensitivity analysis. But they do have a couple disadvantages. Since we can't, with 100% accuracy, estimate what's going to happen, we can't really, or it doesn't really look at the amount by which those input variables are going to actually change. So if the other variables that we're trying to hold a base case change, then that changes the whole ballgame, right?
Yeah.
We don't consider the interaction among the input variables as well. Same thing. Those things can change, different things can influence those factors. And with the sensitivity analysis, where we're just looking at one variable, we're not thinking about what happens to the other input variables that we hold at that base case. So we have no quantitative measure of risk in this sensitivity analysis. So it's difficult to kind of make a judgment about the riskiness of the portfolio because we're just looking at that one variable. And we know that we don't consider the interaction that these other variables may play on each other. So scenario analysis. Now this one I don't know if you guys covered or not. I just kind of wanted to bring you back to EPI for a second. So scenario analysis, we're looking at several possible outcomes, but usually 3, right? So we're looking at a scenario. What's your worst case scenario? What's your best case scenario? So what's our worst case? What's our most likely case, most likely to occur? And then if everything goes right, what's our absolute best case? We do this not just in financial situations, we do this in strategic planning, right? We kind of have those contingency plans laid out. So in scenario analysis, you're being kind of like hyper vigilant on what's going on, and you're like the doomsday prepper, right? You want to think What's the worst case scenarios that we can prepare for it? So it's going to give us a range of outcomes, and we can use that as a quantitative measure of risk when we're looking at scenario analysis. So the advantages here is compared to the sensitivity analysis, we're looking at more than one variable now. We're looking at, a lot of variables put together, looking at a lot of different scenarios and how they're going to kind of play off each other. Probably the most important piece of information it's going to give us, or in my opinion, the best piece, it's going to give us the worst possible results, which I always go to the worst, I always go to the worst thing that's ever happened. I'm one of those people, if I can't get you on the phone, I'm like, they're dead in a ditch somewhere. I know they're dead in a ditch somewhere. So it's going to give you the worst possible results so that you can plan your contingency plan for those worst possible results. So you're not kind of just caught off guard when one of those happens. You have a plan in place to kind of counteract that. So it's going to be a quantitative measure of standalone risk here. It does have a couple disadvantages, just like with the sensitivity analysis. So we're only looking at a limited number of outcomes because of how intensive this process is, and we know, it says the real world healthcare, very complex, getting more complex every day. So it's very hard to consider large numbers of scenarios to happen with the amount of resources that we have available. So I look at a limited number here, and we're looking at all the variables that go into best and worst case. We're saying all these variables have to happen together for the best case to occur and then for the worst case to occur. So we may be pushing it way far to the extreme. So in a Monte Carlo simulation, it kind of brings the best of both worlds together. And this is why it's so complicated, and I don't go over how to do a Monte Carlo simulation, because you have to have a whole computer program to even run a Monte Carlo simulation for you. But it's going to use continuous probability distributions for a couple of uncertain variables rather than our single values overall. So generally you have to get add-in softwares for this. It's very complicated. It's a large spreadsheet that kind of spits out all these different scenarios for you. It goes through, it selects values for these different input variables and gives you probability distributions of them happening. So it goes through and it calculates net cash flow, it calculates all kinds of different measures for your input variables that you put in, and the end result is going to give you back as your NPV, or by correlation your internal rate of return based on your simulated values. So we can get those in kind of like a table form, or we can get it in a bar chart, pie graph, pie chart, whatever. Advantages, gives us individual probability of each variable that we put in. Best part, considers all possible results because it's a computer program to run computer simulations and spit back the information to you. And a lot of managers use information here to get a better grasp on standalone risk. Disadvantages, and like I said, the main reason I don't go over how to calculate it, extremely difficult to specify probability distributions. It's very convoluted, not convoluted, it's very complex to use. And the results appear precise. We want to trust it because it's a computer program, but who puts in the information? What do we know about people? They're fallible, right? You make errors. I've made probably 5 gazillion this semester with each one of my classes this semester. So, they're going to look precise. We want to trust it as a computer program. It's only going to be as good as the information we put in. So if we put in the information, tomorrow the environment changes, guess what? We have a whole new data set that we have to input. So moving into current asset management, this is close to the end here anyway. So short-term financial management, we're looking at current assets, current liabilities, because we're looking in the short term. And primary goal here is supporting the business operation at the lowest possible cost. So we're looking at liquidity and we're looking at operational efficiency here. Get some water real quick, guys. So I can stop coughing. So cash management, just think back to when we talked, I think this was in chapter 17 maybe. when we talked about liquidity. So, you know, the overall goal of our cash management is to have minimum amount to meet liquidity requirements. We don't have enough to cover our expenses in case something happens and all of our debts get called up. So primary management techniques are float management. We're going to go over each one of these: cash and cash budget. So cost must be balanced by these corresponding benefits, because if we're going to put a lot of time and energy into this, we want to get the appropriate benefits out of it, right? So when we look at float management, we're looking at the difference between the cash on the bank's books and the cash we have in our books. So I know I've asked this question before, and I think teacher is the only one who keeps a checkbook. Yeah. I thought she was my only one. So think of this like a checkbook, right? So I have a checkbook, I have my register, I write a check out to my daughter's daycare, I record it in my register. Daycare is like $700, right? My bank register is going to show I have $700 less than what the bank's going to say that I have, right? Because that cash hasn't cleared, it hasn't been cashed out by the daycare yet. So I'm going to say I have $700 less than what the bank does. Same kind of thought here, right? Net float is going to be the difference in the cash in the bank's books, so what my bank says I have and what I say I have. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's say we have family health care. Very ingenious statement. We write 2,000 checks daily, $2,000 in checks daily. We know that it's going to take 6 days for those checks that we're paying out, that we're writing, $2,000 a day, to be received by whoever we're sending them to, bills or paying for supplies or whatever. It's going to take 6 days for them to get there and clear into that banking system. So we call this our disbursement flow, how much we're dispersing, how much we're paying out. And because we know we write $2,000 in checks a day, take 6 days to clear them out, we're going to get $12,000. Multiply how much you write daily by how long it's going to take for them to clear out, and that's going to give you your disbursement flow of $12,000. Let's go ahead and write that down. Disbursement flow, 6 times 2,000.
That's how you forget what checks you wrote, and then you go,
That's why I keep a checkbook. It's okay, I can't keep my
then you have fees.
I can't get my husband to keep one either. Okay, so then family health care, we get $3,000 in checks in daily. And we know it's going to take us 3 days to clear them. So 3 days to get them in, 3 days from the time they come in until we process them and get them in our bank account. So 3,000 times 3, it's going to give us a collection float of 9,000. So 3 times 3,000, negative 9,000. So our net float is going to be our positive 12 minus our 9,000. It's going to give us $3,000 in net float. So net float, difference between the amount we say we have and the amount the bank says that we have. Understand so far? On track so far? Okay. So net flow is going to tell us how well we're doing with collections, and the overall goal is how quickly we can speed up how we're collecting on our debts, and not to do anything unethical, but how can we slow down collections on checks that we have to write out so that we can keep that cash on hand for liquidity purposes, right? Or think back to our days cash on hand. You know, we want to have money on hand in case things happen to pay out, in case loans get called up or whatever it may be. So we're putting our funds to work faster, and we're delaying those payments, like I said, without doing anything unethical or illegal, which unfortunately does happen. So let's look at family health care. What if they had $170,895 in checks, and it takes 25 days to clear them? And they also bring in $165,629 in checks, and they clear those into their bank account in 10 days. What would our net float be here? Let me get this right. So first, what's our disbursement float?
170,895 times 25.
Okay.
$4,272,375.
72. So 4,272,375. So what's our collection split?
165, 629
69.
times
10.
10
Which is
equals 1,656,229 or 290.
290. That 9 really strange. Okay.
And you minus
So then what do we do? Walk me through.
you take the disbursement flow, which is 4,272,375,000, and you minus the collections, which is 1,656,290,
Okay.
and that's $2,616,085.
$2,616,085, and that's going to give us our net float. So what can we kind of interpret from these results? Net float. What can you kind of interpret from these results? So we're paying out a lot, but we know it's taken 25 days, and we bring in a lot in a shorter amount of time than we pay out a lot. So we do a good job of speeding up our collections, and without, like it said, without engaging in anything unethical, we do a good job of kind of slowing down how much we pay out and speeding up how much we bring in. So moving from net float and understanding acceleration of receipts, net float, like we kind of touched on already, we want to accelerate receipts and slow disbursements. So we want to accelerate how much we're bringing in terms of our collections and slow down how much we're paying out. So there's a couple ways that we can accelerate receipt. If you do this acceleration of receipts or receipt acceleration, we can deposit checks received daily. Remember, talking about how long does it take us to get those cash out into our bank. So we can get in a practice of depositing them daily. You know, I do that when I get checks. I try to get to the bank within, that day or the next day to get those deposited. We can use things like lock boxes to put those receipts in or those incoming in. Concentration banking, automated clearinghouses, and Federal Reserve wire systems. So a couple things I would suggest you remember in terms of acceleration receipts: deposit, lock boxes, concentration banking, clearinghouses, and wire systems. So going to cash budgets, we're going to look if we're going back again to cash flows. So we can think of, again, all the ins and outs of the organization and those short-term, they're more like short-term versions of the statement of cash flows, right? So we use these for cash management purposes. Now taking that in and looking at the revenue cycle, which all this factors into, the acceleration receipts, disbursement flow, net flow, collections flow, back to the cash flows and cash budget. So revenue cycle, just looking at the overall, each organization has its own revenue cycle where we look at the process of monitoring and controlling just our revenue production, right? How well we do with that revenue generation. We're specifically focusing in on billing and collecting, right? Each hospital system has their own collections department where they call patients that are delinquent on their bills. And they run just like a collections department for a credit card company or, a loan or whatever. Because remember, hospital starts for altruistic reasons, but we're still a business. Can't just give all the care away for free. You have to collect on some to keep the doors open. So it can be broken down into 4 sets of activities based on when they generally occur. So the first kind of set, before service activities. So when we think about things like pre-authorization, pre-insurance verifications, pre-certs for managed care patients, and then pre-service for financial counseling. So, I think over at the Med Center, if you are expecting a child, you can go in and do kind of this pre-financial counseling. They look at your insurance, They see what your deductible is going to be, what your copayment is going to be. They can work with you on a payment plan for what you're going to owe the hospital. So they do all these before you go in and have the baby. So they work on they walk through all these steps, especially if you're managed care, verification, pre-certs that are needed, and then financial counseling. Kind of go ahead and get that out of the way. Then after service activities, time of service verification, or sorry, I said after, I meant at service activities. So time of service verification, claims production, time of service verification. If you are, one example I can think of is if you go to the ER, and I don't know if any of you, you certainly don't have to tell me, but if you've been to the ER and you have something, relatively minor, they'll send a financial counselor in while you're still in the ER to kind of say, okay, you're receiving the service right now, we ran your insurance based on what you gave the lady at the front, here's how much we're expecting your copay to be, if you want us to go ahead and put you on a financial plan, you be paying in full today, we'll give you a discount if you will. They kind of do all those things at service time. And then we have after service activities where we work with claims, third-party insurance follow-ups. It's not uncommon for claims to be denied, so we have a whole department that works on denials management. I had my insurance, it's not uncommon for them to deny all my claims first time through, and so we have to spend this crazy amount of time trying to get these claims to go through to get them paid. And then payment receipts and posting when payments are received in. And then we have these more continuous activities where we're kind of monitoring and reviewing, seeing how we can work some maybe quality improvement in there to work on this overall process. So before, at, after, and continuous are those 4 activities of the revenue cycle. So just make sure you know kind of examples of each one. So revenue cycle really works to monitor, to make sure that we collect the correct amount, as crazy as that sounds. We want to make sure that we're getting the correct money in. But also, what's our turnaround time? How quickly are we bringing that money in overall? And making sure that we minimize costs associated with revenue cycle with more rapid and correct collection. So how these first 2 intertwine with each other, and how we can do some quality improvement overall to kind of drive the waste out of that process and bring our costs down. So you can kind of, if you've ever interned, shadowed, worked in a hospital, you've probably seen this in some form or can kind of go ahead and guess that I was going to say this, but 2 good keys of revenue cycle management, making sure that we have a good IT setup to make sure that we have good current up-to-date software, and then we have to tie into that we have good electronic claims processing, that we have that needed, current market, best on market, up-to-date systems to help us with these claims processing to make sure that, time is money. We learned that time is money, and every time we waste trying to make these collections is money that we're losing. So we want to make sure that we have these two good keys for revenue cycle management here in terms of IT and electronic claims processing. So a couple things to remember about receivables management. If we have a service and we're paid cash for that service, we get the revenue immediately, right? Like we have the cash in hand. But how often does that really happen? In healthcare, I don't think it happens that much. This is more like I think about go to Walmart and buy groceries or something, right? Give them the cash, that revenue is received immediately. If the service, if we have that provided more on a credit term, we don't get the revenue until that receivable is collected. So this is more like a credit card, right? You pay with a credit card. The company is not going to get the money really until the credit card pays that receivable out. The company says, hey, your subscriber bought this, you owe us this much as a credit card company. And then credit card company turns around and says, hey, Ashley, you spent $5,000 on clothes at the outlet over the weekend. Now you owe us $5,000. Me too.
I actually met a person the other day that doesn't have a debit account, no credit card.
Really? They pay all cash for everything?
We need an account to put on, or like a card to put on top of it. She's like, I don't know what we can
Wow.
do. Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Which, you know, now that I think about it, my mother doesn't have a card. She pays for everything in cash.
But she doesn't even have it.
Mm-mm. She pays everything in cash. The only reason she has a bank account is she has a check. Like, her employer doesn't pay with cash, they pay with a check, and they need an account to put that automatic deposit.
Well, she doesn't even have an account.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, we went down the rabbit hole
I know.
there really quick.
Like,
That's interesting though.
I
You
said,
don't
how
have
do you make credit? She said, I have a car payment, and that's it.
you don't see many people that do that anymore. And I find that if I have cash, I'm less likely to spend it than I am with my credit.
Yeah, that's
So I always make sure to have cash in my wallet, so I have to look at it every time I pull my wallet out,
good.
and then I'm less likely to spend.
I know.
So receivables management and how we manage those things that we're owed is one of those key components of revenue cycle management. So we're going to look at a couple examples around accumulation of receivables, and we've got some more calculations that we're going to look at just to kind of illustrate a couple things. So we have Valley Clinic, and they contract with insurers, and that particular insurer, their patients use $2,000 in services a day. Let me go ahead and write that up. $2,000 per day. And they pay in 20 days for those services. And that's our average collection period, our ACP. So the clinic has receivables at a rate of $2,000 a day, right? Because they provide services at $2,000. And 20 day after, however, so this is called our average daily billing. Sorry, average daily billings. So after 20 days, the receivables balance is going to stabilize at how much? $40,000. So how you figure that out is you simply just take your average daily billings, your ADB, multiply that by your ACP, which is your average collection period, $2,000. You know, that's what our average daily billings are. That's how much we bill out every day. Multiply that by how long it takes us to collect, 20 days. That's going to give us our accounts receivable, our accumulation of receivables at $40,000. So all we did, I think I'm going to need this information on the next slide, so I'll go ahead and put it up. Our accounts receivable, take 2,000, our average daily billings times 20 days, how long it takes us to collect, get 40,000. So, now that we know we get about 40,000 on accounts receivable, how much would you estimate that it's going to cost us to carry this receivable, $40,000, if we finance it at 10%? We have to finance it at 10% to carry this, for lack of a better term, debt, right? So we have to do some debt financing. So what do you think? 10% is what it's going to cost for us to carry this $40,000. 40,000 times 10%, $4,000. So at 10%, cost of carrying those receivables, $4,000. 40,000 times 0.10 is going to give us $4,000. So, especially for healthcare managers and those that are going to be in more supervisory roles where you're dealing with budgets and looking at your department or organization's budgets, you're going to use or monitor receivables to just kind of see the overall health of the organization. But you want to do this continually, right? You don't want to just look at it maybe once a year. You want to see continuously what your receivables are looking like. So we can look at the average collection period, often called those days in accounts, patient accounts receivable, which I think we calculated in chapter 17 maybe. And then we can look at aging schedules. But we monitor those by aggregates. We look at the entire thing as a whole, or we can look by specific payers. So if we know we have 3 different payers, and this payer A takes us 20 days, payer B may take us 15 days, and payer C may take us like 30 days. So we can look at those in aggregate, or we can look at those individually and kind of troubleshoot if we're having issues with one over another. So the average collection period, like we said, just the amount of time it takes us to collect on those receivables. We can track it over time. We know that any ratio we calculate, we can compare out to those industry standards. And I thought this was interesting, and this actually changed from the last time I taught this class was just a year ago. It used to be that the average collection period was 45 days. Now it's went up to 50 days. Does that still say 45 on there?
Yeah.
So why do you think, let's just kind of postulate for a second, why do you think that is? I mean, it's had a 5-day increase from the last time I taught this class. It's taking us longer to collect on these receivables.
Maybe because of the way insurance is, I guess.
Maybe the way insurance is. What about our economic state? How are people doing with affording health care right now? We saw a lot of people uninsured. You know, we're still not so much in an economic downturn, we're starting to slowly come out of it, but you know, if we're looking at it on a graph, we're maybe
But even
No, I'm
those
not.
with insurance can hardly afford.
Yeah.
insurance, yeah.
even some people with insurance can hardly afford the deductibles or the co-payments. You know, and it depends on what
$5
philosophy.
is a lot for every.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it depends too, you know, what your whole philosophy, not to kind of divert us from off topic, but it depends on your whole philosophy regarding healthcare. And if you determine healthcare as a right or a privilege, right? If you go in and say, I have the right to healthcare, shouldn't have to pay for it, that potentially can drive this ACP up, right? If I feel like I shouldn't have to pay for healthcare services, then again, if you feel like it's a privilege, you know, I mean, like I said, not to kind of divert us, but you know, there's a lot of things that can play into it, but I just kind of, not shocked, but I was like, can't believe it's went up 5 days. I mean, that's pretty significant, I think. I mean, overall, you know, in the grand scheme of things, especially if you have a large organization that, you know, their average, you know, if they're bringing in $2 million a day, and your average collection period went up 5 days. Yeah. I mean, so it, you know, it can have some effects on an organization.
It's weird, you know.
Do what?
Healthcare in America is kind of weird. You cannot
Really?
look.
I don't think anybody has said it better than that. It really is just the way it works.
You try to have the best healthcare in the world, and at the same time try to make it right. These do not go together, and you have over 300 million.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you
It's-
either give all those people healthcare and forget about you're conceiving like number one in healthcare in the
Mhm.
world, or be number one and then let him struggle. But you can't do both.
Yeah, it's hard to balance, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, how do we, especially when we have a lot of the governmental regulations coming down in terms of looking at our quality indicators and stuff. So now, you know, we know the healthcare workforce is slowly shrinking. We have a lot of people leaving. And so now we're being asked to do more with less. We have less resources. We still want to strive to be the best, you know, system in the world. You know, how do we do that? Maintain high quality with a decreased workforce. I mean, it's just, I agree, it's just weird how it works. You know, and it just gets more complex every day. So it's just, it's an interesting field to be in, that's for sure.
Complicated.
Very complicated and complex. So we're going from average collection period over to accounts payable. So we're looking at something called trade credit. So we have suppliers that give us stuff to run our business, right? They're going to give us something called trade credit when we buy supplies from them. So accruals and trade credit are going to be considered liabilities for our organization because we get these supplies. It's no different than purchasing something on a credit card, right? That's a liability for us. You know, I go out and use my credit card at Banana Republic at the outlet over the weekend. Now I have a liability. I owe my credit card company money for the clothes that I bought. But these are called spontaneous liabilities because they are subject to change with our patient volumes, right? So we're not going to need, we might not need the same amount of supplies this month as we needed last month because our patient volumes change. Things are happening to maybe a lot of people are not coming into the ER, or maybe a lot of more people are coming into the ER now that the weather's nicer, people are riding their motorcycles, people are getting in accidents, being outside, a lot of things can happen. So trade credit and accruals that we're going to consider spontaneous liabilities because they're subject to change in our patient volume. So when we look at how organizations are invoiced for supplies that we buy, we pay on terms. So we'll say we have Northwest Healthcare, and they buy supplies at $3 million. I don't know why I wanted to drive to there. So we have supplies that we bought at $3 million. So that's our invoice price. And we're going to have payment terms of 210, net 30. Anybody want to take a venture on what that means or what that tells us? Because there's actually a lot of information in that one little phrase right there. It's okay. Okay. Ashley says she doesn't know. So what we're saying here is what the supplier is telling us is, hey, Ashley Company, you bought $3 million of supplies of ours on credit. You owe us. If you can pay us $3 million in 10 days, we're going to give you a 2% discount on that $3 million. If you can't pay us in 10 days, you forego the discount, but you owe us the balance in 30 days. So 10 days, 210 and net 30 means pay us in 10 days, the full balance, we'll give you a 2% discount. Help you out, help us out, we get our money quicker. We turn that ACP up, right, that average collection period. If you can't pay us in 10 days, bill's due in 30 days. The net bill's due in 30 days. So when we look at it, what does this mean? We just went over that. So what cost?
Wait, sorry, the net means
Yeah, so
30 days.
Yeah, so what it's saying is you have 10 days to get the 2% discount.
Okay.
If you can't pay us in 10 days, you're going to forego the discount, and the bill in its entirety is due within 30 days. So what would the cost of the invoice be if we paid within the discounted terms? So we'll just take 3 million times 0.98, right? So we know we get a 2% discount.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I'm not that smart to calculate that fast in my head. So what we got?
$2,940,001 and 96 cents.
96 cents. So what they're telling us is if we can pay within 10 days, we're not going to owe them $3 million. We're going to owe them $2,940,001.96 because we took $3 million, we got a 2% discount, so we multiply the $3 million by 0.98, get our $2 million that we owe. So what if we got a 5% discount on all purchases paid quarterly? Same thing, right? Just take off the 2, multiply that by 0.5, and subtract that from 3 million. So what I just showed you up here, we buy supplies worth $3 million. We take the 2% discount. We owe $2.9 million because that's the net, the cash price. So if we don't take the discount, we're going to owe $3 million. If we pay, we forwent the discount. Now we owe within 30 days the $3 million or the gross price. So the difference here, the difference between our 2.9 and our $3 million, the $60,000, is a financing cost similar to the interest we would pay on the loan. So the quicker you pay off the loan, less financing costs you have to pay, right? So let's take it a step further. Let's say now we have products that we're going to buy on separate orders. We have one that's $3 million. $3 million, yeah. We have one that's $150,000, and we have one that's $745,000. I just realized I write my files like my dad. Isn't that weird? Just like one little thing that popped in my head. And then we have one order that's $745,000. respectively across the board, right? So the payment terms from our vendor here is 415 net 30. So before we go any further, what does this mean?
If 15 days, you get a 4% discount. Otherwise, you have to pay within 30.
Pay within 15 days, we'll give you 4% discount. Otherwise, it's due less than 30 days. Additionally, we're going to give you a 7% contract rebate if you pay all their purchases quarterly in full. If you make all of these by the quarter's end, we'll give you a 7% discount. So invoice 1, we pay in 7 days. Invoice 2, we pay in 26 days. And invoice 3, we pay in 26 days. We did not make any other supply purchases during the quarter. How much of a rebate check should we get that?
So we get a 7% discount.
Okay. So we know we're going to get a 7% discount because we paid it for the quarter.
So we can add on this up.
Okay, what's my total?
3,895,000.
$3,895,000 is my total. Okay.
You
Is it?
get a 4% discount on 3 million, right? Yeah. We did.
Yeah.
Or does not count the 7% discount?
So if we pay in full, we're going to get the 4% discount. That's our payment terms. So this is the entire balance that we owe to our loan supplier.
Okay, so I
right?
don't get that.
So what's our next step?
So we times it by 0.07.
0.07. What was
Which
that gonna be?
which is 272,650.
So we're going to take 3,895,000, subtract 272,650. What does that give us?
$3,600,000, or sorry, 3,622,350.
350. 3,622,350. Here's how we work the math. So we buy total supplies worth $3,895,000, which we calculated because we took the 3 invoices together. We paid all the invoices during the quarter, so we get the 7% rebate. Did the math. 272,650. So our total rebate check that should come in, 272,650. How much we ended up owing? 3.6, right? Because we got the 7% discount. Is that a little clear? Okay. On just how to calculate that.
Only if you show me that in real money, I would understand.
Show me in real money. Okay.
But you want me to succeed.
So I got a video just kind of going over the importance of supply chain management and just how important it is for the overall field. won't watch any more into that. Just want to kind of give you an overview of supply chain management. So you've been affected by supply chain management all your life, whether you realize it or not. And like it said, when you compare it to other kind of aspects of business, we know, healthcare, taking care of people, right? Clinical aspect. Accounting, the language of business. Marketing, the promotion. Supply chain is more like your logistics. So it takes a lot of coordination to kind of bring these different pieces and parts together to make sure this works very efficiently. So if you really like quality improvement and you really like the business side of healthcare, and you want to see yourself in that type of career, supply chain management may be the perfect place for you to go into, because you have to use a lot of quality improvement techniques to make sure the wheels keep spinning for supply chain management. And the rest of the videos here, you guys are welcome to, it's linked up, so you guys are welcome to go look at it. But supply chain management, kind of runs the gamut from beginning to end in terms of requisitioning, getting them in, dispersing them out. So we have inventory levels that rely on volume. We have to acquire those inventory levels ahead of time, so we have to do a lot of forecasting of patient volume. We have to be very cost effective. We have a couple of different ways we kind of handle supply chain management. One we're going to focus in on is just in time. I don't know if you encountered this at all, Ashley, when you worked with quality improvement over the summer. Just in time inventory. So it's just what it sounds like. We have a supplier who's going to ship us smaller quantities more often, maybe like on a daily basis. And we keep inventory an essential supplier in the hospital. So if you think of a company or an organization like Mountain States Health Alliance, their main supplier is called Seneca Medical. They receive a daily delivery of medical supplies from Seneca every day. They get a truck in at like 5 o'clock in the morning with medical supplies that we've ordered. Smaller hospitals may get 1 to 2 days a week, or maybe 1 day a delivery a week, but this is all just in time. So we don't have a warehouse of our own. We have like a third-party supplier or a distributor that kind of houses our inventory for us. They're out of Knoxville. They truck in a truck every day with our supplies. So it's a couple of advantages here. Of course, since we don't have to have a warehouse, we can free up some storage space, and it decreases our overhead costs of carrying supplies. But we do get surcharges for frequent deliveries. So those deliveries aren't free. We're paying for that truck to come in from Knoxville every day to deliver those supplies to us. So we can also have something called stockless inventory. This is where our distributor, instead of coming into a central location for the hospital, so like the med center, their central supplies located in the bottom of the med center. Seneca delivers straight to central supply. They kind of stock and catalog everything. Departments, when they need supplies, they put in a requisition. Central supply pulls that item and takes it up to the department. With stockless inventory, the distributor takes the supply directly to that department in the hospital and bypasses central receiving, right? So the advantages here, we don't have to keep a lot of inventory as a hospital in a central supply room. We get a one-time saving in inventory reduction, and we can reduce labor because we don't have to have people up delivering the supplies, right? The disadvantages here, we can stock out quickly, we can run out of supplies quickly, and if our distributor is in Knoxville, it's a long time to wait if we need some supplies. So we'll have some added service fees for kind of that setup delivering directly to the department, and we have dependence on a single supplier. So what happens if we have a huge snow and they can't get here and we need those supplies? We don't want to be, there's advantages to each one of these. You just have to weigh the advantages against the disadvantages. So we have consignment inventory. Anybody ever put anything on consignment? Like you take your, I took some prom dresses once when I was in college and put them on consignment in a secondhand store. They held the inventory for me. And the same thing is true here, consignment. But the store didn't own my dresses. I still own my dresses. They were just kind of holding them for me, pay them a fee once the dress is sold. So consignment inventory is the same here. Just remember that consignment inventory is always going to be the property of the vendor. The item may be located in our facility. We may use the item, but that is the property of the vendor, not our property. We house it but we purchase it only when we use it. So we see this a lot in surgery, right? With different things we need in surgery. We may hold them in consignment, and then we're only charged when we use those specific things for surgery. So, just to kind of end like we always do, in our last couple minutes together, what are some important things you picked up on today that we may need to know for the exam?
Just comment.
Yeah.
I remember at the hospital they had like these huge expensive MRI machines.
Mhm.
And since like an outside vendor owned them and built the area for them, it wasn't allowed to be attached to the hospital
Mhm.
because it was like a vendor's location in MRI.
Yes,
Yeah. So there was like a little hallway that wasn't attached to the hospital.
that the hospital didn't own,
Yeah.
but they still use the services.
Yeah.
It's just more like on that consignment method. So what do you think? A couple things from today, a couple key points that you picked up on.
Calculations.
Yeah, all the calculation, like all the various calculations that we covered. ACP, ADD, I don't even remember, net flow, net disbursement, all those.
Yeah.
Especially the payment terms, 210, net 30. Probably remember how to calculate that. What else do you think?
The IRR.
Yeah, NPV, IRR, cost of capital, and how they all interrelate.
Like the market stuff, the corporate stuff.
Oh, the risk.
Yeah.
Different type of risks.
Sunk cost.
Yeah, sunk and opportunity costs.
The float stuff.
Flows. Yeah, I think that's
The
it.
revenue cycle.
Those three, sensitivity and what about
Oh, right, the analysis, Monte Carlo.
sensitivity and what?
uh, Sensitivity and scenario.
4 parts of the revenue cycle.
4 parts of rev cycle. Yeah, we did talk about a lot of stuff today. And then just those 3 things we covered at the end as far as like supply chain and how we distribute just in time versus stockless versus consignment. Probably review everything. Okay guys, well we have officially, I'll go ahead and stop the recording now and get that loaded.